Hello and welcome to another episode of Unapologetically First Gen. We have Lucy Magadichian, an immigration attorney based in New York City, on with us today. Hello, Lucy. How
Hi,
are you?
ladies. Hi, Leslie and Stacy. So happy to be with you this morning on a Friday morning on top of that.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. So, for a little background, I spontaneously met a colleague that you and I, Lucy, both know through networking. And then I asked him if he knew any immigration lawyers who might be interested in chatting on a podcast, and he connected us. The three of us officially met 2 weeks ago, and we really hit it off. And it turns out that we all enjoy chatting with each other. So we were like, what better person to bring on a podcast than someone who also likes chatting? Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm an immigration lawyer. I've been doing immigration law for about 20 years, primarily on the business side. Companies that want to transfer employees to the US or want to hire foreign talent and sponsor them either on a visa and green card. Work with investors, lots of startups now, so all that fun stuff. But I never wanted to be an immigration lawyer to begin with. I wanted to save the world when I was in law school.
Okay, so how did you end up as an immigration lawyer?
I'm an immigrant myself. I moved to the U.S. when I was 12, and at that time, I had family friends and family members that, were having immigration rules, and they're like, "Why don't you become an immigration lawyer?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." And then I went to law school, and September 11 happened. I was a first year law student, and I was sitting there, and I was like, "Gosh, I want to save the world. I want to make a difference." But then first year law school passed, second year law school, I got a really cool internship at the Arlington Asylum office. And I found that it was actually quite interesting to deal with people from different countries and different political issues. And then I ended up taking immigration law and in law school. And then from there on, I was like, oh, it's actually quite an interesting field. And here I am, 20 plus years later. Doing
Right.
immigration law, but I really enjoy what I do. I have my own boutique practice, and it's 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 challenging nowadays, but it's still a very good area of law. I want to call it happy law if I can, because you change person's lives for the better. And yes, they can get very frustrated throughout the process. So I tell everybody, just arm yourself with a lot of patience. There's going to be a finish line, and once we cross that finish line, the beaming faces are just makes your job worthwhile, and you made a
Aw.
difference.
You've been doing this for so long. What have you seen as like major changes in those 2 decades? And I'm particularly thinking about in the last, year or so.
The business side still it's going through, but there's certainly been challenges and limitations. There's certain pause on a whole list of countries. There's suspended immigration processing, visa processing. It pretty much the laws on the books are very strictly enforced,
Yeah.
and you know we definitely it's been a little more challenging also with the mobility of people needed to go back to their home countries to get their visa stamps. And before we used to be like, oh, you could go somewhere else, they could do vacation in the Caribbean, they could go get their visa stamps. We can't do that anymore. It's just a lot of hoops, more hoops to jump through, extra hoops. Before we were jumping through hoops, but now like a little extra hoops to jump through. So I always tell people, just be patient. It's just the process. We're going through this whole process, and every day, just wake up and be thankful that not a craziness hasn't happened, and we'll see. One day at a time. Kind of like uncharted waters, even though we were prepared from prior administration. But nowadays, I think it's more like, all right, this is where we stand, but just be prepared if things change quickly, because we get little to no notice when changes get implemented.
That's something that we've heard a lot for people who are personally going through immigration because it takes so long and there's such this backlog. And you're like, well, if you started your process in, I don't know, 2020, but you're finishing now, the rules right now are the ones that apply to you. you don't get grandfathered in. So if your country suddenly makes this list of forbidden countries, then you're kind of shit out of luck, which is really unfortunate.
And I think the toughest part is, restricting people from travel. A lot of them are like, oh, I have elderly parents I want to go visit. I want to visit my family. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, you can't right now. If you do, you might not be able to get you back in. For example, with the H-1Bs, and H-1Bs are the most popular visa in the U.S. It's good for students. They transition to H-1Bs. It's a lottery. We just closed the lottery window, so I think starting this weekend or maybe next week we're gonna find out who made the cut. Then they've made changes to that. But if people are outside, like they're subject, the company has to pay $100,000 to get their employees in. We have to be strategic when we plan things for somebody, like their immigration. Your student, let's plan it strategically. Like students get employment authorization post their study. So when does your employment authorization end? Like how are we going to chime in? Are we going to do H-1B? Are we going to do a green card? So it's whole planning goes into place, but time sometimes is against us, and we have to have a timeline,
Mm-hmm.
but give ourselves enough buffer in case something doesn't go according to plan. And I
Right.
think now more so there's a lot of unexpected twists and turns. But I would say restricting like mobility at this point is probably the biggest hurdle for people not being able to travel as much as they want to.
Right.
Yeah, that's hard when you're separated from family.
Right.
I'm curious, we did an episode on myths around immigration, and one of the myths was that immigrants are here for low paid jobs. There's this misconception that immigrants are the farmhands and the factory workers and all of this stuff. I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the industries that businesses want immigrants from? Can you flip that myth for us?
I work with small companies and with startups. Primarily, everything is in the tech industry. So I'm seeing a lot of students, that are graduating from universities with bachelor's or master's degree, wanting to remain here, and employers willing to hire them. Specifically in the H-1B context, there are new rules now where the salary, that has a threshold. The selection in the lottery will be based on 4 levels of salaries. Department of Labor has surveys for a number of professions. So we have to classify whatever the person is doing under one of those enumerated professions, and then look at the salaries in the area where they look. Sure, they meet either level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And level 1 would be like entry-level position, level 2, level 3, level 4, depend on like supervisory roles, experience, skills. I believe the H-1Bs, there's protection of wages now, protection of workers to make sure they pay wages that are compliant with the standard norms. So I think it protects U.S. workers, and it will protect foreigners, because in the past, if employers were able to get away with paying them very little, now they have to pay whatever's the minimum. But some industries pay so much that's not an issue, but it could become an issue if it's normally the salaries in the area below what the Department of Labor survey is, and then it becomes a little tricky trying to prove that that's the correct, the salary. We have to look at employer surveys and so on. It's geographically, so some areas, right, they tend to pay higher wages, and other areas pay slightly lower wages just because of the standard of living. In the H-1B context, when it's something that's regulated by Department of Labor, you don't really have much of a wiggle room. You have to pay the correct wage. Or there's going to be enforcement now, and they're going to do audits to make sure everything is compliant. So there's no abuse in the program where foreign nationals are being disadvantaged just because they're foreigners and they're cheaper labor.
This is such a nice thing to hear, because you often hear about companies taking advantage of immigrants. So it's nice to hear that this layer of protection is built in to this particular part of that system.
Way back way in the day, yeah, there was more abuse in the H-1B program, but I think for the most part, everybody's in it to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies are very much aware and being compliant. This goes back, like I would say 10, not more 15 years ago, where things really, they've been doing these site visits for a long time to make sure there's no fraud in the program.
Of course. If students coming out of a master's program and they're like, I'm going to start my own company, I'd want to do it here and not back in my home country, what does that process look like?
I mean, it depends on like where they're from, what kind of company they want to build. There are different visas for that. There's the H-1B for entrepreneurs. There are investor visas. There's like one talent visa, depending on like the type of work they do, and you just have to examine it case by case and see will be the best like fit. Sometimes we go straight for green card.
I'm like overwhelmed just listening to it. I'm like,
I
okay,
know.
if it was me, I would just hire you.
Thank you.
There's so much more that goes into this than I could have ever guessed. I'm pretty comfortable with individuals applying for visas side of things because we've helped our parents with it. I've taught citizenship classes. I've talked a lot with like naturalization officers just for that citizenship class. And so I'm really comfortable with that. And that's really complicated. I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm basically that meme of that woman with like the math formulas in front of her face. That's what it feels like chatting with you. I'm like, okay, wait, there's how many visas? There's how many?
It's a whole alphabet soup of visas that we have.
Yeah.
And it's not enough actually for some of the categories. We have quite an antiquated immigration system. It has not kept up with the times.
And
that's for the politicians to resolve because it's Congress can only make changes to the immigration laws.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the laws will change and be updated, but the system is just sort of duct taped to make the laws work.
I think for the U.S. to remain economically competitive and to just retain talent, they have to be a little more gracious in terms of people. I mean, we love to educate foreigners, but not necessarily make it easy for them to remain here because it gets very difficult of securing the H-1Bs or not everybody qualifies for them. We have to, a lot of strategy goes into it, but I think at least there has to be a pathway for anybody educated, and that's my own opinion, anybody educated in the U.S. to be able to remain here because they're contributing so much to the U.S. economy. And a lot of that is a really great talent right now that's coming up.
Yeah, and especially when you're here for college, like those are like your formative years. When you're 18 and you spend 4 years here, that's a big chunk of your life. You built a life here, and it's hard to have to leave at the end of that.
Right.
I would like to switch gears a little bit, if that's okay. You mentioned that you came here when you were 12.
Yes.
What was that like?
I mean, I'll tell you some funny stories where we moved here. I was the only one that like knew English from my family, so I was like the translator for my parents. And go to the store and they ask you, my mother wants to buy something, and she would try to be like, "Can you tell me what they said?"
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny because when I started school here, and this story always makes me laugh because I had these we just moved here and I had these cool sneakers and I was like the cool girl back home because I had these cool sneakers. And I go to school and then at lunch this girl comes to me, is like, "What is that on your feet?" Like, and I'm like, "My cool sneakers." She's like, "These are not cool." And I was like, oh my god, like what do I need to wear? So I go home and I told my mom, like, "Can you please take me to like the sneaker store because I need to have like sneakers like everybody else." So, immigrant parents, I went and made them buy me like a really expensive like Reebok sneakers that are just coming back to style now. I wish I kept them from way back when, so I could fit in with all the kids. When I moved here, it was interesting because in the neighborhood where we moved, there were a lot of kids that were immigrants, and then in the school, I ended up skipping a grade, not because I'm smart, it's just that because, I'm smart, I think. But
You should pat yourself on the back. It's okay to compliment yourself.
So,
Oh, no.
because of the age, because the way the cutoff age, I had finished 6th grade in my home country. I was born in Bulgaria. So I finished 6th grade and enrolled me here at 8th grade. So I skipped the whole 7th grade. And then I got put in like English as a second language classes. And it was first day of school. I will never forget this. And we walked in, and I was a little late because my mom's friend came to register, so I walked in a little late. And the first class, I got into social studies, and I had this wonderful teacher, like smiling, so sweet, and to this day, like I always remember my first day of school in the U.S. And then they had put me classes that were English as a second language, so they will help us with the English to get better. But I was able I was able to pass them pretty quickly because I had already had a basis. But also that first week, I remember we had gone into this class. I forgot which one it was, and I got so confused. Right, you're new, you don't know the kids, everybody around you, and we had to describe what was happening on a picture. And the teacher came in, and she was like, and it was a picture of like kids playing or kicking a ball, and then she's like, came in, she's like, point to the ball, like screaming at me, and I was like, I got so like scared, so I started writing. She's like, no, she's like with her finger, like, point to the ball. And then I was like, oh, she wants me to point, so I pointed to the ball. But I would never forget that. I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. And then she became, like, I became her favorite student after that. But yeah, we had to go through ESL classes, English as a second language. I think it was good because you are with kids that are like you, and it gives you basically, if you don't know English, like it helps you just acclimated. And then I was in ESL for a little bit, and then they moved me to like regular classes like a few months later.
Question. I had just like this thought when Stacy, when you mentioned the myths, and then Lucy, what you're talking about with the different industries. But it would be so interesting to sort of see a breakdown of like the percentages of industries that immigrants make up, particularly new businesses, startups. It would be so interesting to see what's the percentage of immigrant-owned tech companies in the US or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's statistics out there. So the US has, I think, the highest number of millionaires or billionaires. I have to find the statistics somewhere, and I'm pretty sure majority of them are foreign. I'll have to go to my homework and find out exactly the industries. There are a lot of techies right now, a lot of startups, and so much.
There's a networking event in once a week or something like that over by MIT, and I've gone to it a handful of times. It's a lot of tech companies, a lot of tech startups go there. It is a lot of foreign students that are like, I'm starting a tech company and here's what we're doing. And they're just pitching their ideas and looking for investors at this networking event.
We have a lot of foreigners. I mean, majority of the students, I think, come from India. We have India, we have China, and then we have other countries too. But even from other countries that people start businesses, what I've noticed is once the business can be started somewhere else, but if the funding is here, then they have to move the business. And then the VCs want people here in the US.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I've seen a lot of that. The US gives you the platform, gives you the opportunity to start a business. I think it's a lot easier to start a business here than I think anywhere else.
Oh, interesting.
Somebody had told me a while ago, they said the whole like immigration agency, and it's planning everything is like a military operation. This is how big the agency is, and this is how complex everything is.
Yeah.
I had a law school professor, and she used to say, oh, the tax people, you always see the tax lawyers in the corner, they talk their own language. But I feel like immigration is the same way, it's just as complex as tax. And there's so many different, within immigration, there's so many niches, like, that I do like a niche, but I don't like do the humanitarian visas, or I don't do the removal defense. And I partner sometimes with lawyers that do just that. And other lawyers that do just removal defense, and do what I do. And even within my field, like I do employment based, you could specialize, like,
right.
It's vast, and it's complex. And nowadays, there people don't even attempt to navigate this on their own.
One of the big issues that there is for individuals is scams. It's a really big problem.
Huge problem.
Yeah. Does that happen in the business world?
It happens. I mean, they go, but a lot of it I've seen is like in other countries, a notario, I think primarily also in Latin America, notarios are lawyers, right? And they come here, those notarios are not lawyers in the US. So these notarios set up practices, or maybe under the umbrella of some attorney, and then they create a false pretense of we're a law firm, and that's where a lot of scams happen. So some lawyers too, I mean, there are rogue lawyers too that just do things they're not supposed to do.
If somebody is looking for an immigration lawyer, what should they ask to know that they're legit?
All lawyers are barred. Every lawyer can be looked up on the state bars. Some states assign bar numbers, like in New York, I have a bar number. It's open directory, anybody can look that person up. And then you can see if there's like disciplinary actions, everything. So I would say go to the appropriate state bar, and look up lawyers there. There are like a lot of referral lists too through the bar associations, and they're non-profits. Like for example, on the humanitarian side and some family-based cases, there are plenty of non-profits that have staffed lawyers that help immigrants, but it has to be a legit ones. Usually within the communities, they're known, but you have to do your homework.
Especially hearing all this stuff about how amazingly complex everything is. And then we know how frequently things change. You really do need someone who's licensed and who actually knows what they're doing. Someone like you who is actually going to make sure you're on the track and you're getting everything filed and everything's on time and everything's getting responded to when it should be responded to.
Yeah, I get clients that are like, they're iffy. Maybe we'll do this on our own. I said, listen, you could do this on your own. But practical thing is that pay the lawyer to do it the right way, because it's going to cost you a lot more to fix an error than initially to file a properly prepared case.
Right. I know it varies because there's so many different types of cases, but what are businesses looking at for how long it could possibly take?
Gosh, I mean, sometimes the timelines are unpredictable, and I had this one case for an employee, and I was like, they had just graduated, and they had that employment authorization. They had finished a master's program, so I was like, okay, I think we'll be able to get you the green card. And we started the green card process, and then processing time slowed down. So then we had to account for, okay, this may take another 2 years, 3 years, and it did take longer than I anticipated. So timelines, I always tell them it's a moving target. Things can go from 2 months to like 12 months. Right now, it's a huge backlog because everything is like vetting, extreme vetting, cases getting reopened. I don't know what the staffing levels are, but there are cases where we pay premium fee for quicker adjudication, but I'm also hearing those come toward the end of that period and not end up being adjudicated in time. You have to be agile, and that's why I go back to the very beginning. It's like you have to strategize from day one and have those buffers where we can fall back on and say, okay, do we have time? Or certain visas, if you leave the country, we can recoup time that you've been outside and add it back on to get you the full length of the time. I can't say it's easier, but once you have like a student, you take them from like the beginning of the process all the way to green card. And certain countries, for example, India, Indians wait sometimes 15, 16 years to get a green card.
Wow.
Because there's a ceiling, so there's a limit every year for green cards, how many green cards get distributed. And the most applicants are from India and China, and it creates a backlog for them.
Right.
And because there aren't enough visa numbers, these people wait 15 years sometimes for a green card. Well, right now we're down to 11.
That's insane.
And then it depends if they've been here as a student and this and that, and could be 20 years old. And then some of them have laughed and they're like, oh yeah, I'll have my child sponsor me when they turn 21, because by that time I'm still probably going to be waiting for my visa number to become current.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying our system is a little antiquated. It hasn't kept up with the times and with the demands.
Do you just file paperwork, or is there ever a standing before a judge moment for businesses?
I don't really go to immigration court, but there have been times where I had to go. But that's actually a funny story. My first time in front of an immigration judge, I had to go and ask for continuance on a case. I was a fairly young lawyer. The file was just as big as I am. I'm a pretty short, petite person. So the file was just as big. So I go in my suit, in my heels, and then you go to the federal building. So I go in with this huge file, and the partner had told me, you're just going to say this, this, this. And I'll never forget, go into like the little courtrooms, and the judge sits there. And they're administrative courts, so it's not like, the courtroom dramas that you see on,
right.
Law and Order or those shows. So I go in front, right? I'm all suited up in my heels, the big file. And then I go to the judge, and I was like, well, I'm asking you for a continuance. She's like, well, what's the status on this case from there? And I was like, Your Honor, I said, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. And her name was Sarah Barr. I'll never forget her. She had these icy blue eyes. And then when I told her I don't know, her eyes, the blue eyes just went up. And she's like, go find me the answer and come back. So I pack up the big file and I go downstairs in the lobby. And in my heels, in my suit, I spread this whole file on the floor. And I call my boss and I'm like, they were asking me about this. Where is it in the file? I can't find it. And she's like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about this. Well, I was like, good. My first time, completely embarrassed. That I don't know what's going on with this file. So I went back up, composed myself, and I said, Your Honor, I have an answer for you. So then I told her what she was satisfied. She granted me the continuance. But I think anybody's first time in court is you just don't know what you're doing. And then when you're fairly young, right, the judge loves to scold at you, and especially if they haven't seen you, and yell at you. And then you maintain your composure. But it was fun. It was a good experience. I'm glad I had that. But I was fairly young. I don't want to sound like I didn't know what I was doing, but when you're fairly young and you have a big file and you haven't worked on the file and you're just being told, just do this.
Right.
And, if they had told me a little bit more background, instead of just handing me the file in the morning and be like, go down and ask for this, I drive my clients nuts when I prepare cases. I drove my client nuts yesterday. I was like, you're missing this, you're missing that. I need to know what's going on with your case. I said, if I don't know it, I'm not filing this case.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, nobody had asked me this before. I said, well, I do now.
Right.
So
right.
I'm very, very thorough when I prepare cases. So
I'm team be over-prepared, too.
Yes.
I like that.
Over-prepared, I said, I need to know, because if this comes up, I need to know how to answer it. There's always a learning lesson. I think any lawyer you're going to ask, they're going to tell you that first courtroom experience is always a fun one.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's anxiety-inducing. I had jury duty, and that was anxiety-inducing, so I can't imagine being the lawyer in the room.
I find that quite interesting, though, because you've studied all law, and you're there to zealously represent your client. And you get that rush. And I've never been a courtroom trial lawyer. At least for me, it was like, this is what you learn, and you just see it in practice, and you're there to represent your client. It's a cool experience for sure. And especially if it's like an interesting case, you get very engaged in it.
Yeah, but, and you build relationships with your clients too. You want to see them succeed.
Right. But even though I don't go to court, I still get quite interesting cases. And you get to build a nice rapport and relationship with the clients. And even on the business side, there's a lot of complicated matters. I must be a magnet for complicated cases, because it's as complicated as it gets. For some reason, it comes my way, and try to figure it out. You have to be creative.
Right. This sounds so incredibly interesting. I feel like you've opened the door to a whole new world for me. I've never really stopped to think about any of this stuff. Obviously, there's a whole process, but I never really thought about it at all until we started talking about it. I feel like our conversation, I'm going to end up sitting with and then being like, Lucy, I have a question.
You know, you can always call me. But no, wait, it's interesting because there's so many sides to immigration. Like asylum is its own little area or niche
Right.
within immigration. That's asylum silo and then a business silo and then the removal defense. Family-based cases, like there's so much naturalization, which is the last step, which is the happy part. The saddest part are also all the DACA kids here. A lot of them are very successful. And
Yeah.
I wish they could, something can be done for them so they can give good pathways because DACA is just a limbo.
Yes. This is where we tell everybody to call their representatives. Call your Congress people.
Call your Congress people. You're not happy with something, call them up. I mean, they're the only ones that can make a difference. And even, even in some of like the H-1B path, there are other different pathways. Like they need to really reform our immigration system and make it more competitive. But I'm also saying is we set an example for the rest of the world, and I've noticed how everybody around, especially in Europe, they have taken a cue from our immigration system. We actually have quite a liberal immigration system compared to certain other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's a domino effect. If we make it harder, the other countries make it just as hard. I've seen that. We don't have the most terrible immigration system. It's antiquated, but it's not as horrible as any other country.
Right.
And then I can sit here and debate with other immigration lawyers on that. There's so much. I mean, it's my opinion. As I said, I'm more optimistic.
Right.
And I like to paint more optimistic picture. Everything is a challenge in life, so this is just part of the journey.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
With that, thank you so much for coming on and for blowing our minds about the immigration law, because I feel like I just read a book. And that's how much information you just gave me. But before we end, I want to ask, what makes you unapologetically you?
Okay, this is something interesting. People that know me, I'm a very petite, small person, but I'm a giant personality. and I recently read something, and it was like a little post, and I was like, that must have been written about me. But it goes, your smile is your logo. Your personality is your business card, and the way you make others feel is your trademark. It could not have described me it could not have described me better.
I
love that.
That's really what makes me unapologetically me.
With that, thank you so much, Lucy, for coming on. Thank you for our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to rate and review the show and share with a first-gen friend. And if you want to learn more about Lucy or get in touch with her, you can visit her website at lmaglaw.com, and you can also connect with her on LinkedIn. The links will be in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and until next time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.